Before we bloody start, I'd like to say before we start, I'm not in a very good mood. It's not funny, I've had a shit of a bastard week. My wife, the bastard woman. She's had a coil fitted. And she's picking up the CB operators on the blending. Sit down, you wanker. I come here from Cornwall and got here before you did, yet. What a bloody bad day. And last night, we was in the pub, me and Pemberthy, and we was pissed. And we had to walk back home, and it was pissing with rain. Dendel said, well, I got the key to the mortuary. He said, we'll shelter in there. I said, I'm not going in there. Well, we went in, and all these cupboards with all the bodies in the cupboards. Great. He said, Richard Henry Pascoe's in here. He pulled out Richard Henry. He died like that. I said, how's he looking like that? Well, he said he was in that much pain when he died. He went like that. And rigor mortis set in, and that's what he's like. Hell. He said, Bill Perdue is in here. Well, we took out Bill. He's like that. I said, what happened to him? Well, he said he was putting his hat on. And he had a heart attack, and rigor mortis set in, and that's where he is. He said, I got my uncle in here. Well, when he pulled his uncle out, he's like that. I said, well, what happened to him? He said, well, he was struck by lightning, but he thought he was having his photograph took. And then this morning, the Jehovah's Witness come to my place. So he knocked the door. He said, I'm from the Jehovah's Witness. I said, well, come on in, have a cup of tea. How nice to see you. I said, me and my wife is just going to have a bit of lunch. Would you like a bit of lunch? Well, he sat down and had lunch, and after lunch, I showed him around the garden and the house. Now I said, tell me all about the Jehovah's Witnesses. He said, well, I don't know. He said, I never got this far before. But I've had a bad trip in Worthing. I went in for a piddle in Worthing. And you girls, you don't realize when we boys go for a piddle, it isn't easy, is it, boys? We got targets to piss at, we have. We're not hands-free like you buggers. Well, I went in, there was a big black man lying in the drain. I said, why are you pissing in the drain? You're lying down, get up. He said, I'm not allowed to. I just come from the doctor, and Eve told me not to lift anything heavy. But we got these targets to piss at. And you got to be a Bisley marksman to hit the bloody thing. I used to like it, boys, when we used to get the big black wall. That's what I liked. No matter how pissed you was, you could hit that bugger somewhere. And soon as ever you got in the door, you could start. You could just piss where you're like, that's the sort of pit. We're making the video tonight. If that's your mate's wife that's on night shift, you're in the shit. Man, if I had a wife like that, I'd work night shift as well. I'll move that. I don't expect you can see me behind that, can you? But boys, when you went in for the piss and the wall was all black, if nobody else had been there and all the wall had gone dull, you could draw a little picture, couldn't you? That's where the word piss artist comes from. And there was always a cigarette butt in the drain, wasn't there? And you're going to get it all the way down the other end. You've done that, you dirty bastard. You must be worth a lot of money. You don't waste a lot on your clothes, do you? And you're going to get it all the way down the other end or on your own. And you've come all that way, you've got about 3 feet to go, you're nearly out of ammunition, you're on the dribbles, and some bastard that just started would come in and drive the pissing thing back. But last week I went in a brothel. And when I got in, the sign said beef sandwiches £1, lettuce sandwiches £2, chips £2.70, chicken and chips £5, a wank £10, blowjob £20, and sex £45. Right? Well, the woman came out, she said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Are you the lady that does the wanking?" She said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Will you wash your hands and make me a beef sandwich?" But the woman came out, she said, "You can have me for £45. I said, "I'm a bit kinky." She said, "That's all in the money." I said, "When I finish, I want to hit you and spank you with a Wellington boot." She said, "That's all in the price." Well, when I finished, I hammered her with a boot for 4 3/4 hours. She said, "When are you going to stop hitting me with that Wellington?" I said, "When I get my 45 quid back." But you know, ladies and gentlemen, me and my wife have been married 35 years, and I never let her look in the safe. But last week when I went to market, she looked in the safe, and when I got back, Jethro, she said, "I've looked in the safe." I said, "I told you not to look in there." She says, "There's £40,000 in there in cash and 3 eggs. She said, "What's the eggs doing?" I said, "Well, I'll be honest." I said, "Every time I've shagged somebody else's wife, I put an egg in the safe." She said, "Well, that's not bad in 35 years, is it?" I said, "No, but when I get a dozen, I sell them, and that's where the money comes from."